building your portfolio. And I thought that's really cool because this coming September, 20 years ago, I would have been starting York Sheridan for my design career. So as I reflect back on the 17 years, I'm like, what could I share from my experience across digital agencies, building teams, building experiences that can really help that version of myself, that may be helping you guys. So as I thought more about the title around building your portfolio, I thought to myself, is it really your portfolio or is it really more about you as an individual? And so I kind of made some tweaks. There's no objections by Pri, but I think this really kind of puts a perspective being a lot more objective in how you build up your portfolio. So let me kind of get into that. And ultimately, I think you're here, I'm looking at all of you being fantastic and unique individuals, is ultimately how are you selling yourself as a story to potential buyers? That's kind of the perspective that I kind of want to frame as I kind of go through some of my slides. So I think Pri did a fantastic job giving kind of the overview, but I think most of my time has been spent in the marketing digital agency side. Whether it was for behind this thing, critical mass, or a Sapien, or a Sunlight, or a Gale, it was always around solving for the end user. And that kind of built a huge amount of empathy towards the problem space, towards driving measurable outcomes. And so I think I really want to kind of impart on, thinking about your portfolio as a journey in building, applying kind of the UX thinking and building that out. So there's an audience in mind, there's a process, there's a framework for how you kind of get to that selling to the right buyers, or reaching the right buyers, and then building your portfolio objectively to tell that story. So obviously the construct is, you've got all of you guys here selling to the buyers, and this could be startup, this could be a variety of different organizations, but I think we definitely recognize a potential daunting task of when there is an opening, there's a ton of candidates, fantastic people that are kind of going for that same position. So I want to frame it around, again, objectively driving your portfolio towards the buyers. And starting from, obviously the question is, do I need a portfolio to sell? And the answer is a resounding yes, you definitely do. I mean, that's a starting point. But I think if you just simply focus on building a portfolio, you might be kind of too narrow-minded and kind of creating a differentiation in who you are and what's out there. And so I often like to kind of start with a problem with usually better questions, because the better questions might give you better answers. And that might kind of help you frame a more strategic and objective journey ahead of you. So let's start with better questions, better answers. So 5 questions. Kind of a framework that I kind of go about giving. Think about who are they? Who are you selling to? What is that organization? There are categories within Toronto and abroad. Are they consultancies of the world? Are they Deloitte of the world, the Furious of the world, large organizations, Ernst & Young? Are they the Toronto startups? Well, Simple, Ritual, CoinSquare. Are they brands and corporations, Loblaws Digital, RBC, or talent agencies? Mix of marketing, brand, and digital agencies. Right? So think about kind of the cluster that you want to market to. Like, what's going to draw? What are you passionate about? Is it a small organization? Is it a large-scale organization? Like, what fits you? Because ultimately, I think it's you establishing a relationship with this potential buyer. So think about that. Second question. And then, as an organization, what do they stand for? So think about, what is that brand? What do they promise to do? What are they selling? Who are they selling to? And are they giving back to the community? Is that a passion point that kind of crosses over with you? Something that I like to do is, I think someone mentioned earlier, I think it might have been Shu, but doing research is massively important. I think it shows a lot of empathy and commitment and kind of your interest level. And I think a little hack, if you ever want to learn about an organization that's brand new, that's to you perhaps, but it may be a publicly traded company, go to Google, type in annual report Wealth Simple 2018. Go through the first 5-10 pages, and it talks about, like, the CEO will talk about what they stand for, what they believe. They're profitable, which is great. So you want to work for a profitable company. And also any kind of, like, corporate social responsibility initiatives. Like, all of that you can get out of the annual report, because that is the shareholders. They've got to be honest. It's not marketing, it's straight up information. So avoid the About Us page, because that's marketing, right? And we're marketers, and we know, as marketers, we kind of twist the truth sometimes. So third question, who are the actual buyers in the process? Will you be talking to talents, like recruiters, the HR team, the direct hiring manager? And figure that out, because I think that kind of shapes your cover letter, it may shape your conversation, it kind of shapes kind of your communication tactics. Definitely think about, what is it that they actually need? Who are they looking for? UX designers, UI designers. Are they labeling things correctly? Do they really understand the space? Are they looking for a unicorn that everyone's chasing after? Like, well, I am. Is it full-time, is it part-time? And also, as you kind of think about a particular role, what team are they hiring for? So that matters a lot in a large organization. If it's on the banking side, will I be touching the consumer-facing portal of RBC, or is it more the secure sign-in banking? Or is it more internet people tools? So again, as you think about the roles that they need, definitely reach out to your network. Check out LinkedIn. Are there any similar roles, second or third degree connections? Definitely reach out with a passion and say, like, this job is important to me, I'm interested, do you have any intel? It's one of the greatest ways to kind of perhaps shortcut a conversation, get you a little closer to having it in person. Lastly, what is it they actually need you to do? And you figure that out precisely, because I think figuring that out in the job description really allows you to surgically adjust and personalize probably your cover letter, your resume, to who you're selling to. And so, are they asking you to do more research and discovery? Is that kind of your passion point? Or are you more kind of really about micro interactions, building out prototypes, thinking about design systems at scale? Are you thinking really about, as a copywriter, do I really love creating content? Do I love to create the social heartbeat of a brand through that channel? Are they asking for help in art directing a new campaign? So that's, again, better questions will definitely get you the right kind of thinking. It kind of gives you a lens to look at your portfolio to build it out correctly. So that's kind of like a good research starting point. Second part, there's a lot of talk about selling, best folios. There's tons of examples of interesting, cool portfolios, but perhaps not enough information on buyers. So I want to share just one quick slide, recognizing we've only got 20 minutes. The buyer stats. So we should always be numbers driven in a digital world. So when you think about kind of the buyer stats, it might be kind of daunting, but it kind of gives you some perspective on the challenges ahead of you, but taking challenges and turning into opportunities. So you kind of focus in on portfolio here for a second. Once you get through the first couple of gauntlets, the checkpoints, most hiring managers, design leads, they're looking at your portfolio for maybe 2 to 3 minutes because they might be receiving 15, 20 from the actual hiring team. So think about that as kind of a guardrail. So as you think about planning your content and developing your messaging and your story, how do you kind of get across your unique differentiation, which I'll talk more about in the art of selling in a few slides. Within that time frame, as a constraint, how do you kind of capitalize that? And I think as a buyer, when it comes to really thinking about what they need, what I need, what others need, there's 3 things that I share. It's really about that EQ over IQ, the emotional qualities of you. I think a lot of our presenters, mentors here have really talked about that, soft skills. I truly believe that. I definitely, for hiring, building out teams, definitely look for the soft skills, because the soft skills is such an important aspect of teams and integration, and also just kind of believing in that you can scale, you can really kind of further develop. And I think it's often overlooked, and we'll talk a little more about that EQ over IQ. creative problem solving, I think it's not just about creativity, it's ultimately we're communicators, being paid for solving a business problem. So, what is that? How do we apply design thinking to a particular problem? How can you express that in your portfolio? What are some things you might want to do in your cover letter that really expresses your soft skills? I'll talk a little more about that. And I think the last one is super important, which is around that childlike curiosity. I think sometimes we're educated out of being curious because of grades, structures, but I think it's really important that you can demonstrate that you have a thirst for learning, that lifelong learner. And I recognize that we've all been through a fantastic 4-year program or a 2-year program or a self-taught or a boot camp. But I think it's really important to recognize that cycle of continuous learning, staying curious and thirsty. So again, try to express that through your portfolio. So that was on the context around buyers, what they're looking for, some general statistics. I want to share with you a bit of a framework for how you can really sell yourself in that context, because now you have a lens to look through. So think about sellers. Here it is. There you go. So a bit of a framework. I think the top 3 is really the intangible aspects of each and every one of you. It's your brand, your mission, your approach. Completely intangible, but it's things that you should own. That makes you who you are as a problem solver, as a communicator, as a creative. The bottom 3 are really outputs. The bottom 3, I would say, is the easiest to Command C, Command V, copy paste. We're kind of in a sea of sameness, at times through Dribble, through Pinterest. There's a lot of that sameness of output. But I think it's the top 3, you really want to kind of figure out, who am I? What makes me differentiated? In that sea of sameness of selling to that one buyer, how do you kind of come across in that? So it's kind of like, this is where I started from in kind of building out the presentation is, yes, we're building a portfolio, your work, but there's a lot more to it than just the work. So then as you think about selling yourself to buyers, I'm going to migrate the presentation from being on the balcony view into the kind of the trenches. Because ultimately, we recognize that each and every one of you will be in the trenches for days and weeks, figuring out your actual portfolio, designing it, planning the content. So I really want to kind of drill down and give you some tactics to kind of follow through. So as a framework to think about kind of planning for your work, 3 chapters I've kind of divided into a little more the tactical aspects of it. Thinking about your brand, it's kind of a worksheet for that. Thinking about your portfolio, building that out. And then thinking about your resume, which is really around your credibility. So 3 parts. So step 1, let's talk about your brand. Look, I'm not here to talk about brand marketing, brand strategy, brand management, but I think the philosophy of the brand should echo with each and every one of you. And that the tip of your spear should really be about what it is that you're promising as a communicator, as a problem solver. Like, what is that you promise to do when it comes to, again, you might be thinking, I'm looking kind of across the sea here, like everyone is like looking top left, thinking about what is it that I really promise to do in terms of a problem, if I'm given a brief. Is it solving for experiences that really remove a lot of friction for users? Is it really about kind of creating beautiful aesthetics? Like, what is that you promise to do as an individual? And from there, how do you kind of draft the rest of your lineups behind it? What's your personality like? What are your belief systems and value systems as a creative? And then we kind of get into kind of this whole territory of like soft skills and core skills. I think we spent some time, at OCAD, other education locations, YouTube, and there's a lot of content around here. Core skills. There's a ton of content around technical skills. Figma, InVision, right? A lot of that. But I think ultimately you think about as you ladder up, so as you kind of differentiate from the sea of many of us into a very few of you that's distinct, what is that like for you? So definitely kind of go away, grab a friend, grab a peer, and sit down and talk about this framework. Articulate it, because until you can articulate this in this format, it's harder to articulate that on a website as a one-liner in the About Us page in your cover letter. So definitely do that. That was like step one, my wayfinding advice there. Step two, this is really important. Build what you sell and sell what you build. Fairly generalized in that, look, if you are a copywriter, focus on the writing aspect, right? I mean, you're selling ideas, you're selling kind of the metaphor. If you're really focused on thinking about your brand, thinking about who you're selling to, which organizations you would like to kind of connect with, you want to build towards that. Like, if you're really passionate about customer experience, user experience, you're really thinking about, I want to get to the heart of a customer friction, the behavioral aspect of it, then build your site, build your portfolio to focus in on that research activity, that empathy, the insight gathering, primary studies, walkthroughs with customers, customer onboarding, like show those types of work. But if you're really focused on the UI aspect, the aesthetics, the craft, the output of that, then really kind of over-index on those types of pieces with your portfolio. Often I see kind of a catch-all. I mean, I know organizations are looking for unicorn. That's just really a way of saving money for them. Because I want a generalist. I want someone who will do from a full stack designer who will go from customer research into React development. It's great, good luck. But I think you should be in the driver's seat of your careers and think about surgically, building what you sell what you build. And in that process, just focus on 2 to 6 pieces of work, because ultimately, coming back to the stats, if I only have 2 to 3 minutes, in that time, I'll probably look at 2 pieces of work. And in that time, if that seems interesting, I'm gonna send an email, or tell someone to send an email, or just call you, say, really like what you're doing on this project page. Why don't you come in for like half an hour, or maybe for coffee, and talk more about it. One page, that's really scary for me. Whether it's presentation, that's a scary part, starting a command new slide, or a new Figma file. It's a daunting task, but let's think about kind of getting into the trenches of building out a portfolio page. And something tactical I want to get into, which is around a template. So, think about the template here. Think about, I know all of you have seen, dozens of projects, build them yourself, try different tactics. But I think I noticed a trend of everyone kind of just diving in. Like, we're super passionate. The hardest project is shaping your own brand, building your own website. It's been there many times. It's really hard. It's scary. But I think the one thing I would take away here is around like apply a proper product design, UX design philosophy to your own page, right? Like don't just start designing this stuff and start pulling in images, because you have tons of images and GIFs and videos of your prototype. Like go to a whiteboard, go to a sticky, grab a buddy, and just like content block it out, do a wireframe of it. And if I asked like a survey here, probably like 20% of you did a proper wireframe of your portfolio page. Maybe I'm generalizing, but I mean like because we're so enthusiastic, we have the content in top of our head, we start like designing it super quickly. But I really want to kind of drive home that this set of content blocking that I'm giving you is probably one effective way of structuring a story that's less about you, but more for the buyers. So easy stuff. You have a project title. One way, I think we all watch kind of Netflix shows, movies, so on, things like that. So think about the really interesting movies that you've seen. Some of them actually told the movie backwards, right? They gave you like a 2-minute clip of the end, and then like, they rewind, right? It's like, here's what happened, right? So think about that narrative structure as telling a story in that one project piece. So like, what's the outcome? What's the impact? And it doesn't always have to be results, because I get it, there are some passion projects that you're just massively in love with. It's not really a particular client project. You might have like KPIs and conversions and retention rates and blah, blah, blah. That's okay, but think about what is the outcome? Like, is it just kind of work in progress, or the outcome is actually, going through this passion project, I learned how to use a Vision Studio. Going through this process, I was able to create a design system in Zeppelin. That's an outcome, that's an impact. So start with that because that's a nice hook. That creates that relevance. And again, here you want to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer around, they're buying you to kind of help them sell a service for their customers. And the services that their customers have purchased are going to be results driven. So, get in the shoes and get in the same conversation as the buyers who are in the business world in terms of impact. So start with that. Talk about the problem. That's a simple one. I think we're on board with this one. The problem, the solution. Keep it concise, keep it short. Because now you're creating that context and relevancy. Then talk about your role. This is really important to talk about. Again, we recognize many hands touch a project, especially a large one. I was at Sapient. We spent 3 years back in 2009 redesigning Target.com. It's a 3-year project. I think I spent, my team spent 3 months just on baby registry. It's what do you mean it takes 3 months to do a baby registry? There's a lot of flows, there's a lot of screens, and so a lot of people touch a single product. So definitely call out what was your role, what did you do, who did you work with? And also, often within a team, the buyers are looking to you I really need someone to just, hammer home for the next 6 weeks within 3 months, kind of, do a bunch of UI solutions. Call out the specific tools that you actually use. I know it kind of gets very tactical, but this is a really important part because, again, coming back to, quick scanning, in that first probably 30 seconds to a minute, I can get what is the outcome, I get the problem, which gives me the context. And I also know what software you use and who you work with to achieve that. Next part, I think this one's pretty straightforward. I think I see a lot of patterns in which we kind of get into this like a dumping ground of beautiful, creative, here's a journey map, here's an MPP map, here's a user flow, here's a design system, here's design principles, and here's a bunch of UI screens. And then it kind of goes on for miles. If I did a desktop screen capture, it's super skinny. But I want to know. I want to know the actual steps before getting into that journey. I don't mind reading through that long copy that you've written or the series of screens that you put in. Those are things that you spent hours on developing the UI screens. But I think give me a map. If I'm going to a mall for the first time, and there's wayfinding. You go to the airport, there's wayfinding. Give me some wayfinding device which is around your approach. So talk about in here, hey, look, this project, I started with discovery and then definition. In the discovery phase, I did customer research, user research. So paint out there's 7 steps. Imagine going through a financial calculator. There's no steps. It's just endless buttons and forms. That's daunting and anxiety-inducing. So again, same thing, just good usability practice, good user experience applied to your project. So establish the process, establish the wayfinding, and then by chapter, talk about what it is that you did and what was the output of that. And coming back to that continuous learning, being thirsty, reflecting on your actual process. I think it's important to talk about challenges because I think there are no projects out there that will go smoothly. So there are going to be challenges, and I want to know what the challenges were because if you did user testing, you can talk about the challenges. Actually, from our original hypothesis, we had conflicting feedback from users that kind of challenge our MVP requirements. That's a challenge. Be honest with that, right? And then so from there, then talk about the learnings. Because it shows me that you're thinking about the project, you're thinking about what you could have done differently next time, and what you could share with the team. I think there was talks around collaboration, and I think that self-reflection on what you've done is a huge part of being to kind of grow together as a team in an actual real workforce environment. Thinking about kind of driving to the next story, the next chapter of your story. If you've done one particular project, by all means, put more projects in here. I think you want to drive that keeps rolling kind of experience. Medium does a great job in kind of, as you scroll down, there's that little indication bar. goes across horizontally. But more project doesn't mean like more like of the same project. It could also be passion project, just an artistic project. This is pretty easy, right? We know what these are. I think Behance, Scribble, Carbon, Pay, or Fly, Adobe Portfolio. So like put it up somewhere or just hack it in WordPress. But what's important is the bottom part. Like we live in a digital age. We're data-driven, we're being personalized, we're being targeted. So throw up Google Analytics, throw up Hotjar, and start tracking. I mean, like, you're gonna learn how visitors are looking at your content. Which pages are they coming in? How far are they scrolling down your page? That'll give you a sense, like, no one is getting to this part of the page. I should probably change that content. It's all free too. I don't work for them, just by the way. So that was shown. This is from like 2005 MySpace. It's not me, obviously. Different story. Like once it's on the internet, it's always going to be there. But think about telling these two things concisely. A quick template for the cover letter. The cover letters are important because it shows you that empathy of writing to a person, expressing your interest. I think this part's really important. So I'm telling a story about how you can help the company. It's not about, I want a job because I've got rent and all that kind of stuff. And my dog had an accident and I got, whatever. But that's really important for you. How can you help the company? What have you done that's relevant for that? And but also more importantly, as a brand, as a personality, like why is this job important to you? I want to know that because I'm not hiring a worker, I'm hiring a person. I definitely appreciate that. One-pagers, I'm not going to talk about resumes too much, but definitely do one-pagers. When you think about one-pagers, from a content perspective, think about lifting some of the keywords or restructuring some of the skills and tools based on what the job description is actually asking for. It's little things, because again, people are scanning, they're not reading. So the more you can make it easier for your user, for your buyers, the higher the chance of someone kind of getting you through that particular hiring process. Don't just name it resume.pdf. It's not good. So to call it like resume name, job description.pdf, like the context is this. So in my particular situation, I'll be like downloading a bunch of PDFs because they're interesting, but then like in my downloads folder, they're like resume.pdf. And if it's the same file name, then it's like bracket 1, bracket 2, bracket 3. It's like, it's a sea of anonymity, So to kind of bring that together quickly, I'll share one context and a few summaries. When you think about your portfolio, along the left, like you're selling to buyers that have clients, that have customers. So give that some thought. That's kind of the meta, right? You've got an organization that's got paid customers, and that client or that brand has people, prospects, and other customers. So really, as a buyer, you're doing a demonstration, you're doing kind of a dog and pony show. Like you're demonstrating to buyers that you can effectively communicate your brand or your message or your value proposition as an extension of how you can help their customers' perspective. So with that in mind, the first takeaway is definitely know your brand and sell your whole story. Because there's a lot of sameness out there. And I genuinely believe that everyone has a really cool, original story to tell. Number two, your work as a hero, like tell a story and make it objective. I know everyone wants to tell that like long portfolio page about like literally everything, but like think about like, well look, I know that was what I did in the project or in school, but do you only want to show part of it? Because in my career, I want to do a lot more of interaction design, micro interaction, and UI design. But like just crop it, like make it very objectively driven as a content piece. And then I think the last part is really, I genuinely believe personality is super important, that individuality is important. Because, that's the stuff that you can't copy and paste, right? And I think I really do believe that if you want to add more pieces to your portfolio, do a passion project. Work with others, do a passion project, Again, all of that kind of reinforces your personality. Yeah, thank you very much.